Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of What the Haze. I'm your host, Hayes Wolfenden, and today I'm interviewing the American author and podcaster A.L. Lieske. So, welcome. Thank you to appear on my podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, first of all, can you just introduce yourself and then your work to everybody, please, and give an account of yourself.
Absolutely. So I am the author of the Unseen Operative series. Book 1 is called The Lattice Scheme. It was released in September of this year. Book 2 will be released in probably June of next year. It is a 5-piece series. I also run a podcast called Literary Deep Dives and Discussions on YouTube.
Yeah, so what about the Lattice Scheme? What is that about, please?
That is an intricate thing. So The Lattice Scheme, it is a mystery suspense novel, and it covers 3 interwoven mysteries that kind of surround the premise of an investigator being able to enter into dreams to investigate. So it's a little bit imaginative like that. There are elements of fantasy, but it explores, for example, the first mystery is there's an Italian agent who goes missing. He reappears in America 4 months later, brand new identity, no memory of his past, but before he went missing, he was uncovering a secret that was so profound it was going to absolutely shake the world. So American agents have to get him back, and that's where our main character comes in.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. And just tell everybody, I've just started reading the book. I'm only maybe 3 or 4 chapters in, but I like the mystery. I like the dream aspect, I have to say. I like that magical aspect, and I do feel like I'm like, what's going to happen next? And I like some of the foreshadowing you're dropping in already, because I think foreshadowing is it's one of those hooks that builds suspense, and it's got me suspended, so to speak. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more. In fact, after we finish this podcast, whilst it's uploading, I'm going to carry on reading it. I wasn't able to do any reading yesterday. It's just, with a young child, sometimes life is crazy. So, yeah, so fantastic. Can you tell everybody as well about your podcast?
So my podcast, it's kind of a break off of the series in the sense that while you could read my book series and get a lot of entertainment value out of it, the podcast looks into the deeper aspects of it, the more human developmental side, philosophy. We kind of look into the human condition as a whole because there are several hidden points in the series that I really touch on.
Yeah, I'm listening to the podcast at least every week, not just like the individual episodes as they come out. Like, like this week, I've re-listened to like 2 or 3 of them. Do you know it's something I say to people listening, like, especially if you're writing, you should listen to writing podcasts. It gives me like so many ideas, allows me to reflect on what I'm doing. And it's the same with your podcast. I'm listening to it and I'm like, yeah, okay, I like this. I like it. I forget which one it was, which episode, but I think you were talking about trauma. And it was like, it kind of connected with some of the things I'd been writing about or some of the things that old friends of mine had talked about. They'd studied things at university, how you can analyze books based on trauma and stuff, and how characters overcome it or don't, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I really do recommend everybody out there to give it a listen and just listen every week. I find it really engaging. Yeah, one more question. Going back to like the Lattice Scheme, like what made you want to write this book? Why write this book and not another book?
You know, that is an interesting story. So I have never intended to write a fiction book in my life. I read nonfiction, I live off nonfiction. Didn't used to. Growing up, I was really into the classics, Charles Dickens, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, those were my favorites. But I am a nonfiction writer, specifically theology-based. I have actually written 2 Christian study books, one which was rejected 3 times by traditional published houses and another that I published last month. But I was, I've had these profound ideas in me for years. These observations that I've made growing up with an abusive father, growing up with mental illness, health issues, and just the things that I've observed from families around me. And I've just kind of regurgitated those ideas in the sense that it's created a story within my own dreams. Like the dreams in the Lattice Scheme are actual dreams that I have had, often repetitively, and so the story formed in my head that this is a way to talk about these issues with others. This is a way to present a deeper topic with those around me in a way that they can both relate and find reasons to overcome in an entertaining manner. So one day I just found myself writing fiction, and I was shocked. My family is still shocked that I published a fiction book, but that's kind of how it came about. It never had a fictional basis to begin with.
Yeah, it's interesting, but in some ways it mirrors my own like path. I used to the main thing I wrote since I was about 21 was poetry. Just and I started doing an MA in creative writing, but it was a poetry route. And then one day, I don't know. I say one day, it might have been like a build up. I don't remember, but I remember I've got this idea in my head. I know you're reading Jack Strong, and it was like this overpowering sense of I have to write this book. If I don't write it now and I wait for a year, because I'm writing poetry, I need to write poetry. But I was like, I have to write it. I have to. If I wait a year or two, it's not the same. It won't get written. When it does get written, it won't be the same. And yeah, I had to do it. And it's probably the same as nonfiction. And you know, you'll be surprised how many writers come to fiction, whatever kind of fiction you write, via things like non-fiction, poetry. I remember once a few years ago reading like there's the Booker Prize for fiction, and it was in a newspaper, and it was like brief biographies of like the I can't remember if it was the long list or the short list. I think it was a short list, and it was like 20 authors, and almost all of them had started by writing poetry. So I think these roots in are quite common. I think it's interesting when you read like maybe writing like memoirs like by Stephen King. It tends to give the idea that people come into novel writing via short stories, and so if you come in another way, so in your case, theology, non-fiction, whatever, you can kind of feel an odd one out. Hey, this doesn't make sense. This is quite jarring. But then the more I've done it, the more I realize actually people kind of go into writing fiction in all manner of ways. George Martin, obviously from Game of Thrones, he was writing screenplays for Hollywood.
Yeah.
I'm not aware that he was really writing short stories. So people come into it in different ways. And I want to say about non-fiction, even theology, doesn't matter what it is, there's a narrative. There's a
Yeah.
beginning, middle, and end. And when I write poems, they do tend to be quite narrative based. And so, in a sense, it is a story. And so that when you can actually make, I was going to say a leap. I don't think it's a leap. I think it's a
Like a
pathway between
transition.
two. Yeah, I don't think it's too alien. And you know, it's language. At the end of the day, it's about things. You think about all the best books, I think, are about things. And how do you get these things? You either live a life, which I assume most of us do, or maybe you live an eventful life,
Hmm.
or you read books. So no, I think it's a great way to come into it. Actually, I think it's interesting. Again, I'm just thinking now, Tolkien as another one. I'm trying to remember now. He was Anglo-Saxon. He was more of a linguist and also a historian, also a bit of a theologian as well. So again, in that creates the Lord of the Rings. You know.
Yep.
Right, I'm going to move on a bit now. What would you say again? Going back to like what you're writing about, what are the main themes? That you write about?
So we have a series of what I call big real world themes, the macro themes, and then there's the micro themes. The overarching themes I tend to cover a lot in my podcast. These are things such as the human condition, the war on our minds, which comes hugely in part between culture and technology. those things that really control our choices, that we allow to control our choices, that we allow to control our perceptions of what's real and what's not real. Those are huge themes, as well as we have, then there's the micro accountability. How much control do I have of my own life? How much of my life is my own? How does it influence others? There's, the whole theme of ideas, of the subconscious, really is explored throughout the series in various takes. And then, of course, there's that trauma focus, like you touched on. I do like to really dive into the human condition as far as traumas go, tragedies, mental illness, physical limitations particularly are coming up in the second book. So there is at least 100 themes in it, but the overarching ones really do come on what influences us as a human race.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned their physical limitations. I don't think there's enough protagonists in like modern literature
Yeah.
that have physical limitations and are still the hero. There might be some, in the background. I'm just not aware of any. And I know there's a few books coming out because some of my students at school are reading them where you might have like a disabled kid, and they're the hero of their own story, but it's not like, the kid with no arms fighting the dragon. It's like, no, they can't do that. They can't do that. They can be the hero of their own story, but I think that's a little bit of a shame. And don't get me wrong, I write a lot of fiction. It's something I need to maybe think about as well. I'm always trying with every book I write, do something different.
Yeah, it is
You know,
definitely worth the challenge.
yeah.
For my
No, that
life,
sounds really interesting. Um,
yeah.
I just want to, yeah. Oh, carry on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, for mine, it doesn't seem to start off that way, that there is physical limitations, but it kind of has a build up. For example, the main character, there will be a theme of like a terminal illness in there. In a sense, there's blind, there will be maimed people, there will be gastrointestinal disorders, etc. There is a lot. So but once you start writing these real conditions, especially when folks who have literally gone through them or are going through them, it's hard to not write constantly adding them. So it can become a bit of an addiction.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, things like that, they happen to real people in real life all the time. And it's just a reflection of reality. I think it's actually stranger to not have them.
Oh yeah.
And so when I read a book now, and it can be the case with some young adult books, I don't criticize books too much on here, but if there's one I do criticize, it's Alex Rider, and I read it, and it was this. I just called it propaganda. A 14-year-old secret agent, no problems, no insecurities, and it's just like this is not fiction. This is not for me. And listen, I'm sure the writer's a really nice guy. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure he's not bothered about this a podcast criticizing, but I just it's one of those things where it's like, come on, you can give me a bit more. You can make a bit of an extra effort, because it looked like when I've only read the first book, it looks to me like it just wants to sell books. That's the aim of the book.
I agree
It,
with
it
that.
it's there's nothing more to it to me. I just want to go back as well to religion. How has religion like impacted upon your work, or how does it manifest in your work, would you say?
Religion is actually the driving core of my work. The Lattice Scheme, I did. This is this is a crazy way to write the book. Stephen King can probably relate to this, but the book wrote itself. In part, I felt the Lord working through me. I would sit down, like the first 4 chapters, I wrote those by myself. I hammered them out by myself. The actual full book, I attempted to write by myself, by my own thoughts, like outlining things for about a year. It did not work. Let it go. A year later, I felt these impressions that, God wants me to put this in a book, and this is how it has to be done. And the story literally wrote itself. I didn't see half of the twists or turns coming. I would put my dreams in there, and then it would just change around. And the ending, it was not supposed to end that way. A lot of the things that I continue to write in the series, I did not see any of it coming. So I feel, religion to me that is God working through me, is putting these things in. And in that sense, I feel like I can relate in a bit to J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis putting in those deeper things. At the same time, it's different because this is crime fiction, and most people don't look at crime fiction as having any sort of religious aspect to it, and yet I find that it has a more powerful front for that. So that is a bit of how it works into my current works.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not. I do think with crime fiction, detective fiction, I've read a bit or more than a bit, and I think in the modern, like the modern books, I think it does need shaking up a little bit. Um, you know, I really do. So yeah, it's good. I like the fact that it's a bit unusual. I feel like I'm not just writing another normal detective book. That
Yeah,
if you're being brutal with other writers, well, it's been done better before. Say Sherlock Holmes, for example, or Poirot. These classics. Even I read a bit of like Jack Reacher and what's it called? And the James Patterson books. I forgot the name of the detective. And they don't get me wrong, they're good for a while, but then it just becomes copy and paste. And you're like, yeah, I think you need a bit more. To be honest. Yes, again, I'm very much looking forward to keep reading it and stuff. And as I've been reading it, you mentioned your classical influences. Yeah, I kind of picked that up, to
yeah.
be honest. But uh, but I read something. I can't remember who said this, and it was when you're writing a book, and so when the reader reads your book, they should be picking up these influences. That
I
is
should.
a good thing. So I think it's a good thing. I just finished a book by Dickens myself, to be honest. Going to ask you as well, going back to like trauma again. How do you put trauma into your work?
Trauma has woven its way into my work in various aspects. There's because trauma is very multifaceted. It goes on in the mind, it goes on in the emotions, it goes on in the physical environment. So trying to capture those elements in different ways has been tricky. One of my characters in particular, Alma Morales, she's got a lot of trauma in her life. So trying to depict that in the way that she like physically reacts in her body language and her spoken language and in the way that her emotions are conveyed, I've had to really rely on my personal experiences, and then I've also talked a lot with some friends. I don't solidly put like one draft, two draft, two draft. I write about like a quarter of the book. I go back, I rewrite it. Then I go another quarter, then I go back and I rewrite it. And I do that about 6 to 7 times until it's good enough to pass on to my beta readers. They read through it, and then I change it like a final time. So I would say anywhere from like 8 to 9 times I'm going back and rewriting and adding more.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I don't do it like that, but I'm very wary of writers that they do it one way and then they'll say to all their readers, "You must do it my way. My way is the universal way." Stephen, I mean, listen, I like Stephen King a lot, but he's guilty of that
Yes.
on quite a few times, and he's a great writer. He was a great writer, I think, but yeah, he does that too much. Yeah, so I mean, I going back to how you were talking about how when you sat down to write the book and it all just comes to you. It's similar to me. I've got like a conscious life, and then as soon as I start, typing, it's just like something else takes over, and I'm in the world, and it's more like speed of thought. I'm just trying to get it down. But my books are quite short. They're not that long, maybe between 40,000 and 70,000 words. So I can just get it done normally in about 3 months, typically. But then I really do go into drafting. I leave it for about 6 weeks and I do something else. And then I think I think I've put it through about 5 drafts, maybe 5 or 6, but one of those is really quite minor. And like yourself, yeah, beta readers. It's something that, again, I think for listeners out there, if you're not using beta readers, I do recommend it. Listen, I'll be honest. When I first did Jack Strong, I had a lot of beta readers, a lot, and it really helped with the development. And then I just got out of the habit. And I was thinking just the other day, why did I get out of the habit? I don't know, maybe I was embarrassed or something, or yeah, it's a bit nerdy just writing, but I just decided, no, I'm going to get back into it. Any, I think when it comes to getting published, at least traditionally published, I think first of all, you do need a lot of luck. But when it comes down to fine margins, I do believe the fine margin could be the beta readers, to be honest. And I've already got a bit of feedback, which is certainly very interesting. And I'm just creating a table and I'll compare everything. So yeah, beta readers, great. So just moving on, like, what do you hope to achieve as a writer?
So I'm not traditional in the sense that I want to become a well-known author. Um, my book has a message in it. I don't care to make money off of this book. I care that it impacts people's lives. Like, the most rewarding thing that has happened to me as an author has been my readers messaging me and saying, I have this quote from your book on my wall because it means something to me, because it matches my life. And for me, like, that's it. That's why I write. I don't, it would be nice to be well known for being a good author. That would definitely be like a side effect yay thing for me, but as long as it is making a difference in the lives of others, that is my big thing as an author.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic. Somebody's messaged you and said, this is the quote, first of all, that they really like. And secondly, on their wall. Yeah, I think that's amazing. I mean, I'm slightly different. I would like to get traditionally published. Maybe I couldn't really tell you why. It's just I've always wanted it. But at the same time, I want to have an impact on people's lives. I don't. If there's one thing I'm afraid of, it's if I was to get traditionally published and then you have a team around you and then they always tell you you're right and I don't get proper feedback, and then you get the temptation to say, you write your book, you do your first draft, and then someone says, hey, don't worry about drafting. We'll take care of that for you. We'll make some notes. And then you look at it. This is the worst thing you can do. I personally feel as a writer, making that big decision, I think it is a big decision to just really commit to editing. Edit it yourself. That's the main, you're the number one. You know your work better than anyone. And it might not be apparent that you're getting better as a writer in that first one, two, 3 books. By the time you get to book 10 or 11, you know how to do it. And if you stop doing that, if you stop doing the editing phase, I really do believe that you suffer. And I've noticed traditionally published writers, and George Martin's one, and listen, Game of Thrones is fantastic, but the quality of his books goes down as soon as I read an interview of his where he said he was writing 20 pages a day. And then he said, quote unquote, and then I give it to my editors. And you're like, oh, what? Like, so there's people just checking it all the time. And that's lazy.
Yeah.
You weren't doing, you don't, you know, it's like, for example, I know you're religious. I like to think when I get to heaven, assuming I get to heaven, I want to be able to look Hemingway in the eye. Hemingway is not passing off his book to a team of editors. He's getting on with it himself. And sure, don't get me wrong, after that, sure, you'll send it off to an editor and you consider what they say. And that's important too, just like beta readers. But I think passing off your work is such a dangerous slippery slope. And that's one thing I worry about. Or if somebody says, and I've heard this passed on to another traditionally published writer, we want you to write a book about this. We want to write a book about bullying. I don't want to write a book about bullying. Well, that's what the market wants. And and listen, I think the market is important, but it's that balance. I write from what I think my audience likes, but ultimately, I write a book that I want to read. And I think that's probably the best way of doing it. I think you have to be aware of the market, but I was telling my kids the other day about it was about ethics. They were saying that they'd been told, "Oh, you must be an ethical writer," and I said, "No. If there's a line, whatever the line is, whatever you want to call it, ethics, language, whatever, you push against it. you don't break it, but you bend it, and I think every writer has to do that. But yet, being like traditionally published, I'd like to do things and help people. I'd like to get more kids reading because I know reading is declining. But although I don't necessarily think that's through technology, I think it's an easy correlation to make. I think it's because I think there's a lot of copying and pasting with books at the moment, and it's all derivative, or a lot of derivative stuff. You know, I write young adult literature, and so I read it quite a bit. It's very rarely I read one that stand out and does its own thing. And the ones that do their own thing, they don't tend to be as successful, like, for whatever reason. Like I mentioned Alex Rider, but there's other books similar that I don't know. They're okay. Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah, I
I
saw
agree
it
with all that you're
yesterday. I
saying.
was yeah,
Yeah,
I was going to say yesterday I was listening to a podcast by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if you know him as a writer. Yeah, and he visited a prison in America and was giving like a creative writing class and taking questions. And I'm like, that's what I'd love to do, you know. And it's fantastic. It's fantastic. I'm not sure when. I think it was released a day or two ago. So I do recommend you to check it out, and everyone else out there check it out, 'cause it's really informative, and I think it's a good thing for writers to do. Moving on, you mentioned like books in the past, like your favorite books. What books would you say have had like a major impact on your life?
I really hold to through the classics like Charles Dickens, J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Agatha Christie. For American authors, Carolyn Keene. I read all the Nancy Drew series when I was in first grade, and so that was a huge influence on me. But the reason those authors impacted me so much is because their writing has deeper meaning to it. It has such a depth, kind of like what I'm trying to do with the Lattice Scheme. It gives you that entertainment value, but it tells you something really deep and profound about the world and about humanity. And so, like, those are the kind of authors I want to be like. I read kind of like what you're saying. There is a lot of copy paste nowadays. There's so much of moving to what the market wants, and the problem with the market is people don't seek for depth anymore, and you find that they're also not very satisfied. They go from book to book to book. A lot of it is just smut and violence now, which to me is utterly disgusting. But that is what the majority of the market seems to like. And as a human population, like, literature is supposed to be inspiring us to be better, to grow better, to progress into something more incredible than we are, to empower us. And that's what I felt like the classic authors always did for me. And so that's what I also want to put out there, is something that does empower people to live above what the mediocrity that they are living in.
Yeah, what's your favorite Dickens book?
Great Expectations.
Ah, really? I've only read it one time, and I read it, I think, when I was 21, and I loved it. I loved it. And it's probably still one of my favorite books. And I keep thinking about rereading it, but I haven't, mostly because there's just so many other books that I've not read. But I am also scared of rereading it, and it's not the same as when I first read it. A few years ago, again, when I was really young, I read Brave New World, right, by Aldous Huxley, and I loved it. And then I tried to reread it a few years later, and I was like, just didn't connect with me. And I was like, whoa. But other books that I've reread, like I've reread Of Mice and Men, Great Gatsby multiple times, Lord of the Rings multiple times, Hobbit and not only do I still enjoy it, actually they actually get better. And I've read like George Orwell a number of times, Animal Farm like 4 times, and it just gets. The thing is, you go back to like ideas in books. The best books have ideas, so that when you do reread them, you get it. Maybe you didn't get it the first time, but even if you did, you get it again, and you're just like, like George Orwell, Animal Farm. I reread it recently, and it's a really good book. And I was reading it, and I was like, yeah, this is a really good book. And then just when it gets to the bit where the pigs start walking as humans, and I was like, and that is the genius. That's where it just says, and it's so cynical. And I was actually talking about it with my students. I was like, this is about so much more than just obviously Stalinism and communism. It's just about everybody anyway that always, pretends to be the revolutionary or the change giver. They always end up just being like the people they replaced. And if you really think about that, that's actually very depressing. If you really think about it, it's a wonderful book, Animal Farm, and it's crazy that it was rejected at first. So we don't publish books about animals. It's not really about animals. Um, but yeah, Dickens. Do you know? I was reading David Copperfield recently, and one thing that struck me about not just David Copperfield, I'm sure it's all the Dickens books, the ideas, the critique of society is really at the center of the book. It's like, okay, yeah, this is why he was writing. And I'd say another thing about the Dickens books is a lot of modern literature follows Dickens, which might seem strange now. Oh, no, Dickens is this high Victorian writer. Not really. The way he writes, narration, narration, dialogue, maybe lots of description of usually of characters. Most writers follow that. Most modern writers follow that standard. Of course, there's deviations. The writing now, of course, is a bit more modern and direct. We don't typically describe people as exact, but at the same time, I think it's coming back. I think description's coming back again. So yeah, I think Dickens is fantastic. Say about Tolkien, and again, I've read him a number of times, but I was thinking about the Lord of the Rings just the other day. The writing in the Lord of the Rings is beautiful.
It
Like
is.
there's whole sections, and you just underline it, and this is just poetry. This is just the way he describes like the landscapes, and it's just amazing. The Great Gatsby is another book I recommend, where the
Yes.
sections of that it's just like it's so beautifully written. Right, let's move on. So we've talked a little bit, I think, on Threads and Instagram about AI. And I know there's loads of controversy about should we use AI, not use AI on Threads and Instagram. What is your take on it?
I have a very unpopular opinion on AI. Just to preface this, though, I've done a lot of work with AI. I used to work for a nonprofit, it's a global nonprofit called Junior Achievements. I ran that for the state that I live in, and I did a massive AI project with it. And so I understand a lot of AI, where it comes from, where it gets its information, how it puts it out, and so forth. So that's where my opinion comes from. My take on AI is that it is not okay to use AI to write a book in the sense that you put into that, I want to write a story about X, Y, Z. That to me it's baloney, it's garbage, it's pathetic. I believe there's a proper way to edit with AI in that you have to give the AI very, very, very strict specifications and constantly recheck what it's writing to make sure that it's actually editing what you want. Like, for example, you don't just say edit my chapter. You say I want you to look over this and make sure that the grammar matches, that it makes coherent sense when you read through, that the punctuation is proper, and that my language, my vocabulary isn't, so obscure that nobody's going to understand it. If you have like several specifications like that, it is decent to edit with. Even so, there's nothing AI can edit or write that our human brains cannot do better. So I have used AI to edit, not my books. The Lattice Scheme AI has not touched that, but I have used it to edit a couple things on my nonfiction books, and I come back through with what it has, and I write it better because I always it's very generic. You can tell when somebody's used AI to write or to edit because there's these certain rules that it spits out. There's triads. I know there's a lot of controversy on M dashes. It uses a disproportionate amount of M dashes, which is its own thing, but there's so many patterns that ruin the actual linguistics of how things should be written, how they should sound, the punctuation, the grammar, all of it. So I believe it can be used sparingly and properly. I believe the most of the population do not use it correctly. And so for that reason, it's something that I tend to discourage others from using. I do also border on the line that I don't like AI art when folks excessively use it to create things that they can create themselves. At the same time, I do sympathize with those who cannot afford like actual artists to get their work done. So there's a little bit of a mix in there. For me, it's a case by case basis. Why are you using it? Do you need to use it? Are you being lazy, or is this actually a resource to enhance your work? So that is my general take on AI.
Yeah, my take is this: is I think you have to, as a writer, continually reassess like your attitude to it. I don't think it's a case that on Monday or the rest of your life you're for AI or again or completely against it. I think we all have to take nuanced opinions. I've never used it for writing any kind of fiction or non-fiction. I've not even used it for editing. I'm open to it. I'm not. If a writer said they wrote a book and then they passed it off to an AI to have feedback, I don't see much difference between that and sending it out to people. I mean, that's when we get into semantics. Well, you've seen threads, the argument, yeah, but AI's stolen off people, and I'll be honest, I don't care about that. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. You can make the argument of many different things. I think if you're going to use it to edit, I don't think, just like I wouldn't pass my buck to a real person and say, I want you to edit it and I want you to change things without my permission. And then I have to go looking to work out what you've changed. I think just like beta readers, I think you should just give it certain directions, maybe check character details, check does the plot make sense, does the grammar make sense, and get it to make suggestions. I think the biggest issue with that actually is that, like, as far as I'm aware, like most AI, like ChatGPT, can't check a whole novel. It can only check several chapters at once, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to. I'm too lazy. Too lazy.
And honestly, if you do put anything in that is that long, it doesn't retain information well past the first and last paragraph. A lot of
Right.
folks don't
Okay.
know that. So you could say, hey, edit this through, and it might change a few things even through the middle. But if you're asking it to actually analyze how well it was done, you will always find that it missed something. So, I love what you said earlier about the editing process. The editing process is what makes authors great. And skipping that, shortcutting that in any ways, is not doing you a favor or your readers a favor. Like, it's like you said, as an author, this is our work, this is our baby, this is our gem, and
Yeah.
giving it away to anything else, it's an utter disgrace.
Yeah. I mean, what? So, for example, for my beta readers, I think I sent it. I can't remember now. I think I sent my novel off to five or six. What I would do is, I think with if you're going to use ChatGPT, for example, because at some point ChatGPT is going to be good enough to give everyone decent feedback. But I would recommend that it's you send it off to beta readers and ChatGPT, and that you just use it as just another source. And do they tally up? If they do, that again, that's saying something. Just like if you've got five different people and they're all saying we don't like the main character, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that tallies up. But if it doesn't tally up, then maybe you disregard it. I think one of the biggest issues right now with ChatGPT and writing or art, it's actually expensive. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's not cheap. Like if you can get like free copies of things, or free apps, I should say. I think it's fine, great. But like to use that ChatGPT for me, it's like £15 a month, which doesn't sound that much. But I'm doing a podcast. I pay for the podcast. This app is called Riverside. I don't know why I'm giving it promotion. They don't give me any money. That costs money. ChatGPT, do I really use it enough? You know, my podcast is in terms of like dollars is about $20 a month, and I it record podcasts, I upload stuff, It can create art. You can share. You can do a lot of functions. ChatGPT is still kind of two-dimensional. I still think it's kind of where it's good is like if for example, if you finish a novel and you're like, wait, I've got some police. Just say there's some police in it, and you want to know if the way they act or their badges, for example, or their cars, is that true to life? You could just ask ChatGPT. It's a quicker way of asking than asking Google because it just summarizes everything. But
Hmm.
beyond that, I'm not so sure. I think where I've used, as well, I'll tell everybody where I've used ChatGPT is for quick, like it's like copy editing. So
Yeah.
I've got a blog, I've got a podcast, I've got a limited time to have a very catchy title before it's released because I've got a young family, very busy at work, and so I've started asking. I use a China, the controversial Chinese one, DeepSeek. But at the end of the day, I still edit it and I choose it from selections. Honestly, it does a lot better job than I would do. But and this is the key thing, and I've seen people arguing this on threads. Oh well, you're not learning anything. It's not true. If you use ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Gemini to create, certainly in my case, titles, you start to learn. Oh, this is the kind of thing that that's good, and you start with. So sometimes I don't even have time to use DeepSeek, and I'll just quickly create a title based upon what I've learned. I'm the same with like animals. I've got this AI where if say I take a photo of a bird and it identifies it. I first started just obviously taking a photo and uploading it, but now I just have to look at it with my eyes. Oh yeah, it's a white wagtail. I, I've learned. Now the argument online is you don't learn; it stops you learning. I can't speak for everybody. I can speak for myself. That's not
Yeah.
true. Um, but the other side of the argument is too much. I've heard of authors that they write a book, say it's 100,000 words, and they decide, no, it has to be 50,000. They give it to ChatGPT. Now, I'm sure they're paying for a really good version, don't get me wrong. And they say, right, knock it down to 50,000 for me. And I'm like, no, that's crazy. That's too much. That's
Yeah.
like, it's like we're riders. We shouldn't be tech bros. That's when it's too much. And that's why I say about reassessing. You can't get drawn into either side, really, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, technology in general, the way that I see it is, and I kind of convey this throughout my series, The Unseen Operative, there's good and there's bad to all technology. There are things to learn from it, there are proper ways to use it, there's also ways that it can damage you. Like, when we look at all the technology that has boomed up in the last 100 years, it's incredible. We can now travel places we never could before, connect in ways we never could before, get information at the tips of our fingers that nobody ever dreamed about. And that's powerful to do a whole lot of good and to really enable many, many things. At the same time, from that comes the potential of laziness, of addiction, of not learning. So what it ultimately comes down to, and another part of my series focuses on this, is who we're going to be accountable for us. Am I going to choose to learn and to grow in this process as an author? Am I going to really push myself through these difficult things because I know it's going to gain me a skill that I don't possess now but I could possess or possess better? Or am I going to shortcut myself? At the end of the day, that's what it is really, and it doesn't do us favors to shortcut ourselves and to let down our pieces, because whether it's technology we're learning from or other people, it's important to have that growth mindset to learn from our beta readers. Yes, you can use ChatGPT to learn from, but it's in your head and it's you that's accountable for it, whether or not you're going to learn from it or just glaze over it.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. I was just going to say one more thing about AI, and it's if there's one thing I don't like, it's the cult of anti-AI to the point where it's abusive.
Yeah.
And if I've said something like oh yeah, I use AI to, for copy editing for titles and stuff. Not for everybody listening, it's not book titles. I don't do that. This is for like podcast titles, maybe like podcast, like when I do the info for the info page. A lot of it's about time. It's if I have all day, I have all day. Great. I don't have 5 minutes, and it needs to get done. And I do use it for that. But people have attacked me, and they attack other people, and just say you're part of you're evil, basically. And for me, that's just cultish behaviour. I don't think that's right. I think that's why I keep saying about reassessing and not getting swayed too much one way or the other. But I just want to move on just very
Yeah,
quickly
it's
before we
it's
end
really
this.
important that we treat
Just
each other
sorry,
like people. Yeah. Oh, nothing. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that's a fantastic point. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That I think sometimes with social media we forget that, and I think some people, and it's been said by other people before me, maybe at home we're really nice people, but some people they go on social media and they can't act like an idiot on social media, and they can say things to people that are not their friends or acquaintances that they would never say to other people, and that's that. I think we all have to just not do that and just try to think about, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe their opinions have value. That's what I try to approach threads these days. I try to see it as just a way to just engage with our writers, and maybe I'll learn something. Oh, how many words do you write a day? Oh, you write more than me. Oh, you write less than me. Oh, that's interesting. How's that for you? What do you write about? And just keep it like that, really, and not try to kind of try to convince anyone that my way is the right way, because I'm human, and Alexander Pope said, to be human is to err, and I might be wrong. Um, just moving on quickly before we end this. What about marketing? Is it because I know you've been, I think, on social media longer than I have, at least for promoting books and stuff. I'm still quite new to it. Like, what way? How do you market your books?
So what I will say is marketing on social media is the least effective way to sell books. It's the funnest way to market. It's also the easiest way to market. But as far as book sales go, I've been most successful with giving away free books, with engaging people directly, like in person, and with using online newsletters like BookBub, The Fussy Librarian, and putting on book sales. But social media, it has its place for really building up your image as an author and who you are. So it plants seeds in people that gets them intrigued. And for me, it's mostly about connecting to other authors. But yeah, for marketing, I personally find greater value everywhere else aside from social media.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about a newsletter that it had popped into my head recently because I'm trying to like build up, as you can see on Instagram, like a mailing group. It's something I'd heard recommended for there's a podcaster called David Perel, or David Perel, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. And he's recommended that for he was talking about internet writing, in particular, like blog posting and stuff, that you should try to set up a mailing group. So I'm just trying to do that, you know. But it gave me the idea of maybe I should try to do a newsletter, like, my not my life this week, but like my writing life this week. At the moment, it's just an idea in my mind, and maybe I could do it. So this is like a podcast of Dan. This is a blog post that maybe you could read. This is a poem I wrote. I don't know yet. Do you do something like that?
I have tried doing a blog before for my nonfiction books. It was semi-successful. I know others who are very successful at it. What I do know is, there's no formula that works for everyone, especially per genre. Romance genres, they can sell anywhere. But, mystery is different, sci-fi is different, thrillers are different. All of those things are very different. So you really, as an author, just got to try to find what works for you. A newsletter may work fantastically, and it may not. What I do know is
Yeah.
it's a lot of work either way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going down this podcast route, and one of the things I'm trying to do is not, sounds quite strange. I'm trying to not market my book. I'm trying to market myself, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I mean it in a, this is who I am as a writer and as a person. If you like that, if you dig that, hey, maybe you can buy the book. I've had a few sales, only a few, but it's been better than zero. And to be honest, like, doing this with you now, this is not difficult. It's very enjoyable. It's talking to another human being, another writer, in another country around the world about writing. And this is fantastic to me. This is not hard work. The hard work is working out, like, initially how these apps work, and time differences, and getting used to the scheduling, and me finding time and you finding time. And after that, it's just like, what I think is fantastic. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about podcasting. I think if there's one area I'd recommend to other writers out there, I would recommend doing a podcast or write a blog, because it's just engaging. You don't have to write it forever. I've written a blog. I think there's about 70 blog posts. I wrote a lot and then stopped writing for years. And then I went back to it, wrote a little bit, stopped writing it. But every now and again I write something. I think it's a good way to connect, actually, with yourself more than anything else.
Yes.
And I like to rewrite stuff and go, oh, that's what I thought back then. But what have I learned now? I think that's the key, really, as writers. We have to always, and it goes back to AI as well, we just have to keep learning. Whether we use AI or don't use AI, we've got to make sure we're still learning as writers and readers, I would say.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
Okay, I think we can wrap things up there. Okay, so Lieske,
All right.
got to say it's been fantastic talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again in the future. Again, for you and for anyone else out there, one thing I want to do is not just have constant guests. I want to have, like, regular guests that come back and stuff, and maybe every few months, especially as we're writers, and we get maybe successes, we finish books, we start new books, and just update everybody and each other on what we're doing and what we're learning. So you're always welcome back. It's been fantastic talking to you.
You as well. I would love to come back. It has been a wonderful time.
That'd be great. Okay. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.